This is the Future Christian Podcast, a conversation about church leadership, fresh ideas, and the future of the church. Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. Today, Loren Richmond Jr. is in conversation with Dr. Josh Packard. Josh is the co-founder of Future of Faith and one of the foremost experts in the spiritual lives of American youth and religious trends in the United States. He is an accomplished researcher in the sociology of religion and new forms of religious expression. He is a frequent keynote speaker and acts as an advisor and board member to a number of faith-based organizations. Josh has authored numerous books and articles in both popular and academic outlets, including the recently released Faithful Futures, Sacred Tools for Engaging Younger Generations. Previous books include Church Refugees, Sociologists Reveal Why People Are Done with Church but Not Their Faith, and Meaning Making, 8 Values That Drive America's Newest Generations. Josh lives in Greeley, Colorado, with his wife and teenage son, where he is quickly becoming the third best golfer in his family of 3. A reminder before we start today's conversation, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share Future Christian with a friend. Connect with Loren, Martha, and Future Christian on Instagram. Shoot us an email at loren@resonatemediapro.com with comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes. Your support means a lot to us in making this podcast possible.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. We're recording live and in person from Thornton, Colorado, in my home, and I'm here live with Josh Packard. Hello, and thanks for being here.
It's so good to be in person. Usually you have to do these things over a screen, and it's so nice to just get to talk.
I feel like we should call this like an official conference or something, but it is what it is. Josh, you're going down to you want to plug?
Oh yeah, headed down to the Forma conference, which is a first time experience for me here. And you're gonna have some dinner with people for this big storytelling grant that we just got in conjunction with VTS and are helping to lead over the next 5 years. It's going to be really exciting.
Cool. Well, we're here to talk about, amongst other things, your book, Faithful Futures, Sacred Tools for Engaging Younger Generations. But before we begin, you want to share about your background, faith journey, what that looks like, what that's looked like today?
Happy to. I would tell the story by saying that I grew up Lutheran, but the truth is that we didn't start going to church until it was time to get confirmed, even though there was never a sense of antagonism towards religion at all. My dad's Catholic. My mom is born and raised in the Lutheran church, and when it came time for me to get confirmed, they had a coin flip to see, we're going to the ELCA church down the road or the Catholic church, and my mom won the coin flip, but if she hadn't, I'm pretty sure we'd gone for 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5, like how moms are.
Yeah.
And that theology has really resonated with me. Been happy went to Texas Lutheran University, not really for religious reasons, but it was just sort of in my sphere. And then just stayed involved with it. I became a sociologist of religion because I was super interested in this, and met my wife actually in college, and we were both campus ministry assistants, but we've never been in formal ministry positions. I don't pretend to have been a pastor, or even, like a youth minister, or, sort of non-ordained positions. But lots of friends who are and stay connected to the church.
But some camping ministry experience, which I think we'll hopefully talk
2 years
about.
at Sky Ranch Lutheran Camp, which is an incredible place.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is the extent of my formal ministry positions.
Yeah. For those paying attention to, we do have some non-human guests, some dogs in the background.
We have a live studio audience.
Yeah, live studio audience, that's right.
2 really adorable dogs.
I'm glad you think so. Yeah, my kids would be so sad if you guys left. Well, sociologists sometimes get weirded out when I ask this question, so I'll leave you some space to answer this how you want to. Asking about spiritual practices for yourself, if you want to answer it sociologically, what spiritual practices you see in the broader culture?
We are coming up on one of my favorite seasons in the church of Lent. It's one that means it holds a particular kind of place for us at the church that we go to now. Our son is named Holden, not after Holden Caulfield, but after the Holden Evening Prayer, which is a liturgy inside of the ELCA. It comes out of Holden Village, and our church does it every Wednesday night during Lent. And so my wife and I really liked that liturgy. We did it when we were campus ministers, and it's really, I mean, what a stroke of luck to get to find a congregation that does it every Lent, for the Wednesday night. So that's a big one for us. But also every morning when my son is eating breakfast and my wife is there, I read a poem or two from Mary Oliver, and that has been a nice grounding sort of, I mean, she's overtly, it's not even like undertones of religion, just overtly. And so, that's been a good practice for us lately too.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing. I am curious. This is something that my co-host Martha is more attached to than I am, but we hear a lot of people talk about utilization of the daily office. Mm-hmm. Have you seen anything there? Like, do you think it's more than anecdotal, this more leaning into more ritual and spiritual practice?
I mean, I can speak for myself and my friends. Like, the Pray As You Go app has been incredibly useful in this regard. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it is sort of deeply contemplative.
Yeah.
It feels like this resistance against celebrity preaching in almost like this very overt way. When I look at the landscape of what young people are engaged and energized by these days, I mean, there'll always be an attractional element. Churches who do that very well are always going to be able to attract people. But the questions that seem to be animating them are also those things that sort of connect them to some sense that what the purported truth that they're getting is connected to something more than 15 minutes old, right? That they're, even if the basic content of the sermon is the same at many other places, I think they're really hungry for this idea that there is a strain of truth or experience at the very least that stretches beyond time.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because we're talking today about your book, Faithful Futures, Sacred Tools for Engaging Younger Generations. And I think the first thing that comes to mind, I suppose I should give you an opportunity to just kind of generalize what the book's about, what you hope to accomplish.
Oh, sure. Thanks. I mean, I think the way that we generally tend to approach generations in religious spaces is not particularly useful. I make this distinction a lot in my work that, like I say, I want to be useful, not interesting.
Yeah.
And I think the way we talk about generations as containers tends to be interesting, but not particularly useful. And that's largely because of the amount of diversity that is present in our world. And this, so trying to classify an entire generation as, fill in the blank was never particularly good. As the world has gotten more diverse, I think we're actually moving backwards. I think we're capturing less than even half of the actual truth and experiences of Gen Z, say, or Gen Alpha, when we try to characterize them all in a particular way. And so the book is really an attempt to get people to rethink their approach to generations as more process than product. So, let's think about, what are they experiencing? What questions are they asking? How can we speak a language of truth into a moment in this world when everything seems up for grabs, as opposed to trying to stereotype them with a set of bullet pointed characteristics and then build a program that like messages those characteristics, which I find to be actually kind of demeaning.
Yeah. So it's basically like, the point is like, Gen Z is always name characteristics. Let's build a program around them being like socially media driven and obsessed, for instance. Let's build a program. And your point is like, that's too simplistic, not accurate.
Right. And often it gets worse than that. Like, it's right. Like Gen Z they have short attention spans, but right. Millennials are narcissistic, right?
I mean, we are, but
Gen X is slackers. I mean, yes, you are, and we are, but we're also a lot of other things.
Right.
And that characteristic is not evenly distributed.
Right.
So if you go to rural Iowa, you're going to find a very different experience of a 15-year-old than if you are in Boston.
Yeah.
And if you're gay, you're going to have a very different experience of being a 15-year-old than not. And if you're black, your experience. And now, this is the most diverse generation that has ever existed, not just in America. This is the most diverse generation that's ever existed anywhere ever. And so the idea of let's say they're all media obsessed. Well, that's not true. That's just you're going backwards, not forwards.
I mean, I think it's important to say in general, because I think the whole generational thing, it's sort of like this left brain, right brain, or the amoeba brain or the reptile brain.
The reptile brain.
I feel it's become this helpful analogy that's been made into concrete fact.
Right.
And I sort of wonder but so I appreciate that perspective. You talk in the book to begin too, and I sort of think this is along the same vein around why the mental models no longer work for Gen Z, Gen Alpha. So if I understood that, you're kind of what you and I might know about being a young person, throw that all out the window.
Yeah.
Is that too harsh?
I don't think it's okay. So there's two reasons. The argument that I'm making is that, basically when we try to understand young people, we reach back to our own experiences as young people.
Yeah.
And we know that they're not 100% the same, but that's where we start often. And, the argument that I'm making is that the world is so much different, has accelerated the pace of change, over the last 10 or 15 years, that our own experiences are not particularly helpful in that regard. But more importantly than that, even if you could say, actually, the kids that I'm working with are a lot like I was when I was a kid, that may be true. I think the more salient point here is that thinking that you can extrapolate from your experience to the experiences of today's teenagers with some degree of certainty, almost inhibits or prohibits your ability to be curious. If you think you know what's going on, why would you bother to stop and ask a question? And that gets us to where we're at in this current cultural moment, where the source of truth, the source of trust, is going to be found in relationships. Yeah, it's not going to. The data are clear. People don't trust institutions or their leaders. It's all through relationships, and when you're not inclined to ask questions and be curious, it's really hard to form a relationship with somebody when you think you already know everything about them or a lot about them.
It's interesting that you say that, because I'm thinking of a podcast I produced for an Episcopal diocese that's supposed to be centered around young adults. So I always listen as I'm editing as a sort of mini focus panels, especially when they have young adults on. Yeah. And this young adult, this woman was college age, and she was talking about inviting friends to church. And her point was you know me, you trust me.
Yeah.
If I'm going there to church, it must be safe.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. I mean, we did this big study at Future Faith around listening and faith formation, and over again, the data from that are lining up with the other kinds of data we've collected around just reinforcing this idea of, the primary point of trust is not because somebody with an important title tells you something.
Yeah.
You encounter a big institution on the corner that a whole bunch of people go to. People are more inclined to trust the small church that their friend goes to than the evidence of, thousands of strangers flocking to the same place on a Sunday. And that's a big shift. I mean, even when I was growing up, we would have looked at the big church and said, well, look, if that's good enough for those 3,000 people who are in my community, then it must be good enough for me. And boy, I just think the world has changed.
This is sort of off topic, but I want to stay on this because it's interesting. I'm thinking of, I have a book on my shelf from a Gary McIntosh. I don't know if you've heard that name. Thinking of Southern Baptist context, but certainly there's some truth to this. The bigger churches have a draw, but I think it's really intriguing your point about smaller.
I don't think it has to be small. It's just the access point that matters, especially for sustaining, or for people who are on the margins, is going to be through.
Okay.
Because somebody has personally invited you or goes there or whatever.
But I guess I'm thinking that this is probably a bit too dramatic, but it gives hope, I guess, to a smaller church. Like the way to reach people is not like you have to be huge and dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
Well, I think that is true. Like, I think there is some, I would see it as hopeful, but I like relationships.
Yeah.
I'm not inclined to run a big campaign.
Right.
I like getting to know people. But if that's not, like, I think it could be very discouraging if you are trying to sort of play the same game as big and well-resourced churches, and you don't particularly want to lean into the slow and long work of relationships.
Yeah.
It'd be hard.
Well, let's get back into the book. You talk about fast and slow with youth and young adults.
Yeah.
Talk more about what you mean by that.
Well, it's sort of a takeoff from the famous book, Thinking Fast and Slow. But this is, I was reading that book and I was thinking about teenagers. And I was like, they're sort of growing up fast and slow.
Right.
That, but the problem is that adults often don't see it. They only see the slow part. They see the sort of in-person part. And, they see the barista at Starbucks that can't make change in their head. They see the teenager that they meet who can't shake hands or make eye contact. And, the kids that they know who are turning 16, 17, 18 and still don't drive. Want to drive. And they see it like, why are you, you're all these traditional markers, like you're growing up slow. And sociologically, the data are the same. They're leaving the house later than ever. They drink less. They have sex less. They do drugs less. They're graduating from college later. They get married later. Like, it's just all of these things, good and bad. I mean, some of those are, doing less drugs is a good thing, right? But these sort of normal parts of adolescence are all just seeming like they take forever. And that's what most adults see.
Right.
But there is this aspect to being a teenager today where they're growing up faster than ever. And a lot of that is happening online. And this is the part that adults almost never see. And so the exposure to information that they get, I was thinking about this through the lens of my own 15-year-old, and I was like, he is encountering more news about the world and more perspectives. In a week, in a day, than I would have gotten in a year. When I was 15, it would have been like 1993. And I just think like, I was trying to think like, what was my access point to news? And it was, literally what I would have overheard as I passed through the living room and my parents were watching. I
mean, mine would have been like flipping through the newspaper on my way to the sports section.
That's right. Yes, I would have seen the headlines from the Dallas Morning News as I went to the sports. But it was, and so he's getting, and you could argue that like what he's seeing, we have a New York Times subscription and he reads that, but also it's a lot on YouTube Shorts,
right?
And his friends, and so you can argue about whether it's true or not true, and all that. That's a whole different question. But my point is that they're growing up so fast, and so this cognitive dissonance that produces, where often the adults in their lives are saying, what's taking you so long? And yet they're, as teenagers, they're having these conversations. The way I often report this is what one teenager said to me is like, how am I supposed to listen? I'm paraphrasing. It's basically like, how am I supposed to listen to this adult about the way they think I should be behaving when they don't even know the first thing about pronouns?
Yeah.
And it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that, I don't think that adults are resisting those conversations. They're just literally not in the spaces where they're happening. It's almost like teenagers living parallel lives. That's what I mean by growing up fast and slow.
Yeah. You talk about the importance of listening in that conversation. Certainly you talk about it in your book. I think I'm thinking again about like mentorship, how we would understand the kind of mentor-youth relationship is like me giving advice. And if I'm hearing you correctly in this conversation, in the book, I feel like it's almost the opposite, would you say, where it's like rather than me just sitting and like imposing my wisdom on some kid, it's like me like, tell me what's happening and I'm just going to be listening.
There is an aspect to that. And people who have done, look, mentoring is proven. It is effective when done well, almost more so than anything else. And, but there's a lot of different ways to do mentoring. And as you mentioned, some people have a very narrow idea that it means like, I'm going to dispense some sagely wisdom to you. But good mentors know that that's a very important, but takes up a very small amount of the time. Most of the time is actually spent listening to them. And I think the challenge here in ministry settings is that it can be really hard to sit and listen to a teenager.
Yeah.
They say wild things.
Yeah.
Like, if you earn the trust enough that they start talking to you, some of the stuff they say is, can be off bonkers, frankly. And then some of it is just like alarming, about what their plans are and, what they're thinking and how they feel about things. And the tendency then to want to step in and correct or teach can be really strong. So I think it's a really useful like this listening posture becomes really useful because we have to remember that a lot of what teenagers are doing when they're talking is just working these ideas out. I had a teenager tell me once, like, I don't even know what I think or believe until I say it out loud, which is so wild to me. But I started seeing that then everywhere. Like, oh yeah, they're just working these ideas out. And I take a lot of comfort in this idea of, like, I think back to the music I listened to or the people I hung around with, the kinds of, like, what I thought I would be when I was going to grow up when I was a teenager. All of that has changed.
Yeah.
So I think we get really, like, we know that change is the hallmark of youth. And yet it's like we abandon that when they start talking about issues of faith. Because and they say something that isn't, like, in line with what we want. If we feel like, oh my gosh, we got to step in right now because this is life and death. Yeah. It is really important.
Yeah.
But they're also likely to change. And so, like, what is more important, correcting in this moment that will change, or being in a relationship with them and accompanying them over the long haul and establishing that trust so that they keep coming back to you for the conversation? I would argue that the second one is more important.
Well, let's talk about that, because I'm thinking of this just in my own life. This Thursday, I'm taking my daughter to the first confirmation class at church. You talk about theological formation being less about filling their buckets, which what I would think, like, that's certainly how I was raised. It's like,
oh yeah,
you gotta, like,
I memorized a bunch of stuff I don't remember now.
Right. Even like me growing up Independent Baptist, there certainly wasn't formal confirmation, but it was like you had to believe the right things. Like, that's what knowing the right things is what it meant to be a Christian. And at my church, and thinking back to a podcast I had with the youth director there, Mike Orr, like, I think we talked about this, but, like, I mean, one of the statements of faith from one of the confirmands last year was, like, pretty, like, sloshy, if that makes sense. Like, it wasn't super, like, I believe X, Y, and Z. And I was like, I was kind of like, part of me, like, as an old get off my lawn person, was like, oh man, this is in the church. And then I thought, well, this is great, actually, that, like, this young person has space. And it gets into this point you're talking about, conversation partners, which, as like someone who's invested my life in the church, makes me really nervous, but I think, like, there's something to it. So why don't you talk more about that? Okay,
look, we are immersed in all things band. My 15-year-old is in every conceivable band that, he could be in. He's on drumline, he's in a marching band, he's in a concert band, he's in a jazz band. And I think he's great. I like going to the concerts. I think they're enjoyable. But we don't go to high school band concerts because we think it's the highest form of jazz. We go because we're interested in where our kid and our friends' kids are at musically, and we want to support them on their journey to being whatever it is that they're going to be musically. I don't know. That's the way we approach all things with teenagers. I don't know why we flip that around when they come, when they stand up and make these confirmation statements or the statement of faith, or when they go through confirmation class. It's like, again, we all of a sudden we start treating it like, oh, this is the highest form of theology.
Yeah.
Like, why? If we don't expect the highest form of anything from 14-year-olds, why would we start expecting it when they make these kinds of statements?
Yeah.
And if we approach it in the same way that we approach these band things, of like, oh, this is a really cool this is an amazing snapshot of where you are right now. We don't think you're done. Like, formation doesn't stop. It's more like, this is what you feel. This is an announcement or a proclamation of either what you're saying you feel about your faith, or what somebody else is, accrediting you as saying, okay, they've been through confirmation and this is what.
Yeah.
Either way, it's like, it becomes a way more interesting conversation, and it becomes a way more interesting point of relationship if we think of it as like a signpost on the road as opposed to the destination. And not only do I think it's more interesting and useful, but I think it's more accurate.
Well, that gets in something else in your book I want to ask about right answers not being the goal. But also I thought, and maybe I can find this quote, that infinite choices is not like also the helpful either. You say when young people live in a world of infinite choices, nothing is going to keep them from exploring. Our job now is to show them how to navigate those choices, not to try and restrict them from making them. So, because you can tell me if you disagree here, but this is, I think one of the limitations of like progressive Christianity is like, it seems to be like, oh, it's just all out there for you. So am I hearing you right here?
Well, I think when I talk about infinite choices, I'm talking about it's not a normative statement of saying that there should be.
Okay.
I think this is the reality.
Yeah.
The reality of being on Instagram,
right,
is that you have infinite choices.
Right.
And I think trying to counter that with what is basically your own algorithm, when you give somebody a statement of faith and say you must agree to these things, you're essentially trying to wage a war of your algorithm against the Instagram algorithm. And you're going to lose that battle.
Yeah.
It's just not, until somebody comes out with, like a denominationally approved social media network where you can only post the things that align. I mean, A, nobody's subscribing to that network. And B,
I feel like that's true social.
Maybe. And so it's not to be, I'm not saying it's a better world.
Right.
We don't let our kid on social media, but I'm saying it's the world. And so that becomes like an imperative parenting and I would say formation task for ministers is, what do you do with that? How do you, if you're not equipping them to navigate, if your only answer to encountering a world of infinite choices is to turn it off, then I think you're just really not equipping them for the world.
This sort of gets into Jonathan Haidt's work.
Yes.
Which, that was sort of my, like, I don't know what the word is, like, I finished the book like wanting more because I feel like he was like the takeaway. I feel like is always like restrict screen time, and certainly all good things, but also there wasn't much around. Like when I read it, I was like, man, like I feel like there's just a huge hole. Like I told my daughter, I'm like, my middle school daughter, I'm like, because she picked up the book and read the introduction when I had it sitting around. I'm like, to me, it's like people are just lacking. They're hungry for purpose and meaning, and they're trying to fill it with screen time. And just saying like, oh, let's cut off your screen time. Like they're going to find that somewhere else.
Yeah. I think it's wild that the same people who would say you can't ban books will happily ban Instagram or Facebook or whatever. To me, it's just the most, it's the weirdest contradiction. I'm the person who says like, of course there are books that shouldn't be in an elementary school library.
Right.
Like, I don't think The Catcher in the Rye should be read by third graders, even if they wanted to, for example. And I do not think that you should, like, it would be, I don't think it's criminal, but it would be ill-advised to let, preteens on social media. I mean, the research is really, really clear about the harmful nature of this.
Yeah.
So for me, the question isn't, do we allow it all or do we ban it all or do we ban this thing or that thing? That's hardly ever helpful. Look, I wanted to listen to Dr. Dre's The Chronic so much, precisely because my parents hated it so much. It's a question of like, how do we consume this? And at what ages for your kid is age appropriate, right? And are you having conversations like we had this, talking in the book about this person who said, you adults, you're the only people who make this distinction between online life and in real life.
Yeah.
Like she said, it's all just life to me.
Yeah.
And so I go home with this information. This said this to me at a conference and kind of blew my mind. And I was like, you're right. Like, it's totally correct. Like, they make no distinction here. And I go home and I'm talking to my son about this, and he was playing a lot of Minecraft at the time. And he goes downstairs to log into Minecraft, and I was like, hey, make sure, I hope Minecraft is better today because you're there. And he stops. He's like, what does that mean? And I was like, I don't really know, dude, but I'm just trying to make sure that we're, I realized what we had done is we had sort of given that world over to him, and we weren't parenting him through it in the way that we parent him in other places. Like, we talked to him when he would play sports. We're like, look, God expects you to show up here on the field in the same way that God expects you to show up other places. We talk about sportsmanship, and same thing at school. Make sure your school is better today, because like, if you're a Christian and that's what you say you want to be, that should be a different experience for people around you. And so, how he executes that is largely up to him. But we thought, well, gosh, we better extend this over to the online space as well. And, some very simple things, like we'll sit down and watch, we'll go through he has YouTube, but no social. So we'll watch YouTube shorts together. I want to see how he's processing and thinking about this stuff. And, I can't imagine why anybody would just like let them unfettered into online spaces and not be having what does God want from you in the space conversation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I want to shift gears here a little bit, and I suppose it's still on track. I'm thinking of, I have an IKEA furniture right here. Yeah. You talk about the IKEA effect. Explain that, and then how you see that relevant here.
Okay, so the IKEA effect, I love this concept. So it's there's like these places in the social sciences, cognitive sciences, or like they'll list all these biases, these social biases that we carry around, and sometimes these cognitive ones. And one of them is called the IKEA effect, and it's this idea that even if it's a piece of junk, which I'm not suggesting IKEA is, we have loads of IKEA stuff, but even if it's a piece of junk,
it sort of sometimes is.
If you've built it yourself, you feel more pride over it.
That's why I have this IKEA furniture. I'm like, do we really want to get rid of that? I spent 5 hours assembling that.
Yes. The idea is that like having to assemble that is not actually a bug; it's a feature.
Yeah,
like IKEA wants you to assemble it in some ways because you're prouder of it. Even if it's a total pain in the butt, maybe especially if it's a total pain in the butt. And so the bias says like we shouldn't really value those things more. Like they're not better because you put it together. It's just is. But the reality is we do.
Right.
And so we will move these crummy, falling apart IKEA bookshelves. And when I say we, I mean me, from house to house, because they sort of tell a story. So the relevance here is that I think that very much applies to faith. That a faith that is handed to you through a set of principles may be more certain.
Yeah.
And this is where I was saying, I think drawing from my own camp experience, like we could hand kids a faith in the course of a week. Like we learned how to do that, and it's effective, but I don't know how durable it is. And that was the question. Like, what I think about, like, what do I really hope for teenagers? Well, I hope that we're introducing them to a conversation about their own faith that they never let go of. That they're always engaged in.
Yeah.
Not that they get it right. I mean, I believe in God's grace and I believe in the Holy Spirit. And so like getting it right is just actually not all that important to me, as much as being in conversation with God for the rest of your life takes far more precedence.
So I'm thinking about, I was just reading in a book yesterday, this guy was talking about how in LDS faith, the 2-year mission is really formative in producing a lifelong faith. Like, I think about this in my own life. My wife and I were married very young. Like, I was 21, almost 22. She was 20, like, obviously worlds ago.
Yeah.
But I think about, like, almost 6 months after we were married, like, we moved across the country for me to take a church job. And it wasn't a 2-year commitment, but we had to like sink or swim on our own.
Right. Very quickly.
There wasn't like mom and dad to like go home to when we were having a fight with the other or whatever. So I'm just wondering, like, I'm thinking of like sociologically, does that track then like with this IKEA effect idea, like the LDS mission, like what are some other ideas or implementations of that effect?
Well, I think a lot of what there's a lot of helpful lessons from the 2-year mission, and not the least of which is that it removes young people from a world of temptation precisely at this developmental stages when they're most likely to give into those temptations.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's genius.
Yeah.
Like, right in those college years when you may be drifting away and you're encountering a whole lot of new ideas and perspectives, they're like, oh, hold on, let's pause. And, I think about what I was doing during those 2 years, and I'm not sure it was necessarily moving me closer to my faith. It may have been taking me further away. But again, we come back to this idea of like, what's age appropriate?
Yeah.
So it isn't throwing the training wheels off on a bike that you've never been on before.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it's like, you're gradually putting them into more and more context with more and more freedom. And that's what I think about driving. My son is about to drive. I don't know how it's for you. When I turned 16, they're like, here's a license and all the rights and privileges of everybody who's, ever been driving, people who've been driving for 20 years, you can now do all the same things they can do. That was insane, right? Like, that made no sense.
As a driver now, I'm like, no.
Yes, exactly.
I don't like that idea.
But now we've learned so much. And so we don't do that. Like, of course I had driver training just like my son does now, but his first 6 months, he can only drive himself, and then he can drive one other person for a period of time. There's like this graduated approach where we like slowly build them up to the experience of, first you're driving for a year of training with your parents or another adult, and then you get like 6 months of just you driving alone, and then you can let one other, let's think about faith that way, right? Like, how do we get to a point where you're truly on your own? Well, it's not by just tossing, somebody who doesn't know how to swim into the deep end. So I love that about the mission, but that's my point. It isn't just being thrown into the deep end. It's just the next logical step of seminary classes in the morning and a family that's immersed in faith and going to a college that is aligned.
And this is, I feel like, the problem in evangelical culture is, especially in conservative, it's like you get this, like, I don't know how to say it, not derogatively, but, there's sort of like Sunday school approach to faith. Like, I want like my 8-year-old to learn these Bible stories. Yeah. But then I'm not sure how many contexts that like it becomes age appropriate of like, oh, are there questions? Do we have questions about the text or these stories or, theology?
Sure. Well, and I think that it's, you have to really look at the theological underpinnings behind those positions.
Right.
And so this is where I'll sort of rebalance the scales here and say, I think from an evangelical perspective, I understand that theologically what the mission is to do is to win souls for Christ.
Right.
And, the commitment of baptism is that once done cannot be undone.
Right.
So it would be understandable if there was less focus on what happens past that point.
Right.
I don't think that that's the best way to equip people for a fulfilling life in Christ. I think that there's more, paying a little bit more attention to that side of the timeline would be helpful, but I understand it. I mean, what I'm saying is like, I don't think it's inconsistent with the theology.
Well, and I think it's not inconsistent, like you said, but I'm also thinking like Ryan Burge's, forget one of his past book about like, that having a profession of faith doesn't really make you any more likely to attend church than otherwise. So I think if anything, like, hey, if we want people to be involved in church, like lifelong, we want to make a lifetime profession or commitment to faith, which certainly I want for my kids. Like, trust me, like I have a lot of angst writing in this confirmation.
Yeah.
Like, I want my kids, I want my daughter to, I want her to make a profession of faith. I want them to be baptized. And like, I have a lot of angst about that. Trust me, if I have a lot of angst, you can guarantee my grandparents or my parents and my in-laws have a lot more angst.
Yeah, for sure.
Not where I'm sure I'm going with that. Anything else you want to say on this topic before I transition us, I suppose?
No, I mean, I just, again, like, I'll just reinforce that the idea is that you said it. You said, what we want is blah, blah. And I'm like, well, let's be sure. Like, not everybody wants the same thing.
Right.
And I think sometimes we design systems that don't necessarily get us to the places that we want. My commitment is like, I want my own son, I want other people to know and have that experience of a God who cares about them through the course of their entire lives. But again, that's not everybody's theology.
Yeah. Two quick things here before we do some closing questions. One of the things I appreciate, as someone who's obviously invested in the church, really appreciates sacred space. You talk about the importance of communal worship and sacred space. Talk more about that.
Look, the loneliness epidemic is well documented. The Christianity especially is a communal expression. It is not. I'm not a theologian, but I've not read a defense or seen much that suggests that at a broad effort, aside from some, hermits and people who are really committed themselves to this monastic life, that it's intended to be alone.
Yeah.
And I think that reality, that theological position meets this modern reality where also young people especially need to not be alone.
Yeah.
And their online relationships are real and they are important. And adults need to wrap their heads around that.
Yeah.
And they're not enough.
Yeah.
And that is also true.
Maybe that's the way of saying it. Like, it's not enough.
It is not. It is a critical component of their social reality. But it is also critical that they are together in person, and they need more spaces where they can do that. And I think worship is one of those ideally situated, moments of giving yourself over to this period of time and to this space and to these people.
The last thing here, with regard to the book, you talk about the rise of the micro-narrative as opposed to, if I remember, you contrast it versus the meta-narrative.
Okay, you want to get nerdy for a second?
Yeah, I do.
So I was a lit major, and we talked a lot in the late 90s about, this is postmodernism.
Right.
Postmodernism is going to be the death of the meta-narrative, that it's going to, things like the American dream or Christianity's big overarching, like what sociologists would call the sort of sacred canopy, we're going to go away. Essentially, and the world was going to be fractured into 1,000 pieces. And Robert Bellah wrote about Sheilaism in the 1980s, where every individual had their own, unique faith. Sheilaism. Yeah.
I mean, that gets into Christian Smith's MTD, right?
Moralistic therapeutic deism. Yeah. I don't think that's true.
Okay.
Like, I don't think that the world has played out that way. Like, when I take I think that plays into those biases around that we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation around, like, this generation is narcissistic or lazy or what have you.
Sure.
When I take a sober look at what I see teenagers actually doing, in a lot of cases, what appears at a cursory look to be like they're picking and choosing is I call these micro-narrative approaches, which means that they're not rejecting the idea of a narrative, which is what the death of the meta-narratives.
Right.
And that everything was going to be fragmented. I think they still long for something that stitches all this together. It's just that they're no longer looking for institutions to provide that narrative for them. Instead, they're trying to create that narrative through, like, this pathway through those institutions, because they don't trust any of them enough to sign on wholesale. I had somebody in the course of not this project, but a different one say, like, how am I supposed to check a box to say that I'm Catholic when the church has consistently gotten it wrong about women? They're getting it wrong about gay people right now. They failed to hold pedophiles to account, and I can't co-sign.
Right.
Yeah, I can't check that box. But I like a lot of the things in Catholicism. I like the theology there. It's just, I'm not going to affiliate or identify with the institution. So what I mean by micro narratives is not again, not a normative statement. I'm not arguing that this is good or bad. But what I see is that young people are trying to figure out a pathway through their life with integrity, where they can, say, care about the environment and order a bunch of stuff on Amazon that gets delivered in all these cardboard boxes, right? Like, how can I, be a part of this campus ministry where I get to, I have these important relationships, and I get to ask and have conversations about the most fundamental questions in the world, and also participate in, the coexist LGBTQ club and be friends and like support all my friends who are, lesbian, gay, transgender, what have
Right.
you. How do I manage all of these conflicting things? Because I'm not gonna just sign up for one or the other.
Right.
But I'm also not willing to live a life that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
The death of the meta narrative was sort of this idea that we would all get very comfortable living in these fractured environments. I just have not seen that. I mean, I think young people are still trying to figure out a way to make their life make sense. And that's what I mean by they're constructing these micro narratives, because it's not going to look the same from each, from kid to kid to kid.
So rather than this top down, like this is, I mean, and since we've talked about formation, like this is what essentially formation traditionally, or confirmation, same thing, right?
Yeah,
formation is like, I'm going to be a top down. This is the truth. And if I'm hearing you right, you're saying like, it's not that they're not going to take some elements of that or most elements of that, but I don't know. I'm still getting in my head, I guess.
Well, I think that it's useful to have those things. I mean, it's like the church. I'm not suggesting that the church is trying to find its way through. The church knows. The church has a meta narrative.
Right. I mean, I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, it should.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that as teenagers are trying to figure out who they are, that they are not, I mean, I think the evidence is really clear. They are not just going to check. They're not going to just like, oh, cool, thank you. I've been waiting for somebody to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Try telling a teenager what to do and see how far it gets you. And so to match the reality there is not to say, you can pick whatever part of this you like today and change tomorrow. To match the reality is to say, look, this is where this comes from. This is why I believe it. This is why we feel so compelled by this charism or by this statement of beliefs or by this creed. It is not, this is not an opportunity for you to, sort of like combine the Apostles' Creed with the tarot reading, with the Jewish Shabbat. Like, this is not what we're doing here.
Okay.
You need to respect and honor the traditions, but you can't do that if you don't know what they are. So this class is really about teaching you, where this comes from, who asked what questions to get us to this point, so that you can have some working understanding of how to incorporate it into your life.
And I feel like we're running along here. This is where I think, tell me what you think about this. This is where I think like denominationalism is really well suited to this. And I always wonder, like, how can denominations and traditions do a better job? Because like, I always think like, well, they've been thinking about these questions for so long.
Yes, I agree. And I'm not of the mind that denominations are going to present their reality as like, well, here's one truth among many.
Right.
But I do think we can do a better job of saying like, here's how this came to be.
Yeah. Do you think, broadly speaking, this is a broad brush, big time, I feel like American Christianity is kind of, at least white American Christianity has kind of broken into these like liberal and conservative evangelical. I've wondered, like, does American Christianity almost need to be like, would we be better off like re-emphasizing our uniquenesses?
Oh, it's an interesting thought. I have not thought about that. I'm not even sure I would be the right person. I just, sociology gives us such good perspective. I don't know that it's very good at telling us what we should do.
Fair enough.
And it's just so like that would cause me, I would have to think hard about that because it would take me outside of like my default skill set.
Okay. Yeah? Okay. Well, hey, I got you a hump, so I feel
there
like
you go. That's great. That. Yeah. No, I'll be thinking about it on the drive.
Okay. Let's move on to closing questions here. If you're a pope for a day, what do you want to do with that day? Anything you do? Any kind of like broad sociological thing you'd want to study?
Well, look, I love what Francis was doing with synodality, and I'm hopeful that continues. So if I was pope for a day, this Catholic focus on the church becoming a more listening, synodal church is what that means for your audience that is not super familiar with the Catholic world. Basically, it's this attempt by the Catholic Church to start listening to the rank and file, and that's what even if we're extending Pope beyond Catholic, like if we're just using it as a metaphor.
Yes, it is meant to be a metaphor. Right. So thank you for.
I would pick up that very particular strain. I mean, I really think that if we could be more curious, more listening, more structurally oriented towards process over outcome.
Yeah.
I actually think that we would find more of the outcomes that we want.
That's good. A theologian. I feel like since you're a sociologist, maybe I should broaden this conversation. Like, I usually say theologian or historical Christian figure. Is there like a historical sociologist?
Historical sociologist. Okay.
You'd want to meet or bring back to life?
Okay, let's go.
I mean, if you want to say like the Apostle Paul, that's fine too.
No, So I'm actually going on a trip with Andy Root. I see you've got some of his books there, but
yeah.
Andy is running a sort of pilgrimage lesson experience to Bonhoeffer's house in Germany this fall, and I'm really excited to go there. So Bonhoeffer would be very high up on that list for me, and I'm excited to get to dig in and learn more.
That's cool. Yeah, talking to Kara Root Friday as we're recording this for the book. So, what do you think history will remember from our current time and place?
Well, this is a lot of recency bias. I mean, if we're just talking about the last, 5 or 10 years, I think they'll record how mean we were to each other. I mean, it just in some ways feels cruel, and it just it's hard for me to get out of that. I hope that we're able to turn the tide on that, so that when history remembers this, like that, these last 10 or 15 years, that posture of these last 10 or 15 years is a blip, and so it's not worth noting. But right now, I keep coming back to it. Like it feels so mean and small. And
yeah,
I know that's like there are lots of our newsletter, Future of Faith, is filled with people who are doing amazing and expansive things, but so much of what I see in the news and politically just feels cruel.
Wow. Yeah. What do you hope for the future of Christianity?
This feels like a weird place. I do this a lot, though, for the sociologist in the room to be reminding, like sometimes I'm giving keynotes or whatever, or talks in front of pastors, like large audiences of pastors and ministers, and I'm the one reminding them that the Holy Spirit does in fact exist, that you don't have to control everything.
Yeah.
And in fact, you can't do everything.
Yeah.
And it seems like we've given over religion in a lot of ways to this sort of capitalist ethic of, the greatest among us are the ones who control the most variables.
Yes.
And
yes,
we have a faith that is explicitly opposed to that. And I think we would do well to remember it.
Boy, that'll preach.
I'm no preacher.
Where can people connect with you? You mentioned the newsletter, Future of Faith.
Yeah, so I'm a co-founder of an organization called Future of Faith, and you can certainly go there. We try to make as much of what we do free as possible. We have an economic model that relies on partnerships for evaluation work with the organizations who have grants. So you're not going to come and get a sales pitch from us. We don't have a shopping cart. You can't buy anything. So you can sign up for stuff for free there. But thanks for asking about the book. So faithfulfuturesbook.com. And the reason I want to talk about this is that we're really trying to do this launch differently, put this book out into the world differently, and trying to be as generous as we possibly can be. So, for example, there's free webinar that you can go and watch if you want to learn more about the book. You can get chapter summaries, but also, like, if you know somebody who would benefit from this book, all you have to do is drop a line to me from the form on that page. I'll mail them a free book.
Wow.
If you know somebody who's doing something amazing in ministry, what happens when you write a book like this is that you end up getting invited to speak in places. And so I'm tithing some of that back into this Faithful Futures Fund. So if you know somebody who's doing something amazing in ministry, drop me a line, tell me what they're doing. We'll send them $250, no questions asked, just as a gift. So we would love to have more people taking us up on that offer. There's no strings attached. We don't sign them up to a mailing list or anything like that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming down here, and safe travels on your way down to Denver from here. And we always leave folks with a word of peace. So may God's peace be with you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is produced by Resonate Media. We love to hear from our listeners with questions, comments, and ideas for future episodes. Visit our website at future-christian.com and find the Connect with Us form at the bottom of the page to get in touch with Martha or Loren. But before you go, do us a favor. Subscribe to the pod to leave a review. It really helps us get this out to more people. Thanks, and go in peace.